So I was going to ask you to climb down into the ditch with me, where the half-dead person is lying, because I thought it would be important to get his perspective, to see and hear what he sees and hears. But then I drove down through Four Corners about 5 p.m. the other evening behind a bus. But you know how this is, right? Stop, and it's go, and it's slow, 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 and because I was really near my turn, I couldn't pass the bus. So I sat there behind it as it unloaded. And all these people climbed out and began walking. Presumably, they were coming from work or school, and they were headed home. And some of them were dragging along very tiredly, and then there were some younger people who were sort of pushing each other around in jest and sort of goofing off in the street. And I watched as all these people crossed in the crosswalk, and you could see the drivers were like impatiently tapping on their steering wheel, or some of them had sort of pulled out into the crosswalk as if to say, hurry up, I have places to be, and walk a little faster. I also noticed that almost all of them were African American. And I don't know, but for some reason on that day, it bothered me. And just after the bus pulled away from the bus stop, I made my turn, because when I'm headed home from here, I often cut through this neighborhood to avoid 495. And there, precariously walking along the edge of the road because there wasn't a sidewalk, was a Hispanic woman talking on her cell phone. And it was I think Thursday, it was pretty cold out, and she was sort of bracing herself against the wind. And I don't know where she was walking to or where she was walking from. However, it was the time of day when people were probably headed home. So that would be my guess where she was going. And this also bothered me, because here I was, driving safely home with the heat blasting in my car, because I'm always freezing, so I have it on like 1,000,000 degrees, and I'm listening to the radio, and unless I had crashed, I didn't have anything to worry about, or who I might run into along the road. The people out there that I saw walking did have to worry about who or what they might encounter. And if I'm being totally honest, it bothered me that all the people I saw walking, none of them were Caucasian. And I know this is a sensitive subject, but it's true that because of where I was born, what type of education I was privileged to receive, and what color my skin is, I have been afforded different opportunities than most of the world out there. And so are many of us here, to varying degrees. See, sometimes I take Cooper to school in the morning and we walk. And we enjoy this a lot. And we take our dog and we talk about what we see, and we talk about his classes, and we just sort of do this mom and son thing. But we only do it when the weather is nice and when I have enough time to actually walk to the school and walk home. Otherwise, if the weather's bad, he takes the bus or I drop him off. None of us here have to walk. We can walk, but we don't have to. We choose which roads we walk and which roads we drive. And we also choose which roads we avoid. Driving down 29 that day, I realized that most people don't choose. There are ways I throw people in the ditch on a daily basis, and I don't even realize it. And if I'm not throwing them in the ditch, I'm doing plenty that keeps them down in the ditch. Plenty to make sure that I don't end up in the ditch. Plenty to make sure that I'm not robbed, and that I'm not beaten, and I'm not humiliated or left for dead. Because see, the fact of the matter is, if you're lying in a ditch, naked, with your clothes ripped and scattered all about, and you're half dead, with sweat and blood caked to your body, unable to call because you've been eating dirt that's in your mouth from lying in the ditch. Well, you didn't climb down into that ditch yourself. Somebody threw you in there while you were on the road, walking. Specifically in the story today, walking from Jerusalem to Jericho. Jerusalem is the center of it all. The town square, the market, the temple. It's all about Jerusalem. And then there's back in Jericho, where the people are headed. So that this guy that's in the ditch, he's heading from someplace to someplace. If I were to take it into modern context, he is heading from work to home. In our reading of the Good Samaritan, which we've all heard year after year after year since we set foot in a church, we have forgotten about the guy that's actually in the ditch. Somehow in our telling of this tale, we have forgotten about the violence done to the man in the ditch. What about him? What do we know? Hardly anything. The only thing we can deduce is that he's most likely a Jew, since he's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. Maybe he was at the temple worshiping. Maybe he was a merchant selling his wares. Maybe he was a priest, having just been purified. Maybe he was a lawyer or a layperson. Or maybe he was someone of little consequence. We really don't know. All we know is he fell into the hands of robbers. Jesus leaves out his identity, and with all the other details in this parable, Jesus doesn't tell us who the man in the ditch is. He could be anyone. Anyone walking from here to there. Maybe he was an African-American student coming home from school. Was he treated fairly and impartially at school? Was he afforded the same choices and chances that my own children are afforded? Could he get home safely? And was home even safe? Or maybe it's a she, a woman in the ditch. Maybe it's someone like that woman I saw walking alone. Had she been nannying for a family all day long, and now she's headed home to take care of her own family? And was she paid a fair wage? Was she ridiculed for her broken English? Was she happy? If your road from Jerusalem to Jericho is always met with struggle, if you've never been granted any respect, if you've been ostracized and ridiculed, well then your view of the world, your view of humanity, it might just stink. Your view of God might stink too. If all the priests and Levites, and all the Christians and Jews, and all of every other person from any religious organization has been passing you by your entire life, what is going to be so different now that you're in the ditch? The view from the ditch is probably quite similar to the view from the road. The stripping and the beating and the robbing, that's what makes one half dead, and it doesn't occur in the ditch. It occurs on the road. And you know what's also true is it could be a mom or a dad or a single person. It could be someone who's really led a charmed life in the ditch too. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are on the road headed from Jerusalem to Jericho, then every day you're robbed and stripped of things far more precious of clothes and money. Dignity can be stripped away, or purpose can be beaten out of you, or compassion can be stolen, and love can be killed. What muddies our face and hands on the road may be the same things that muddy our face and hands in the ditch, the blood and sweat and tears of life. Because the truth of the matter is, all of us have been priests that passed by the person in obvious need and ignored him. And all of us have been the good Samaritan that does help and does the right thing. And all of us have been the liar who pushes and pushes at Jesus, questioning his motives and trying to pin him down so we can just really know what we need to do in order to make it in God's eyes. And we've all been the guy in the ditch, left for dead. And so my question to you this morning is the message of this parable really: do good deeds. Do the right thing. I'm not saying that that's not admirable or even desired by God, but it's only part of the message. Because my problem generally isn't knowing what I should or should not do. I usually know what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And I don't actually think we need a savior of the universe to tell us that. There are countless self-help books and varying religious institutions and social service agencies across the world that will all tell us that message. My problem, what I'm unable to do, is turn around and go the other direction. See, let me explain. Pretend you're looking toward home, just as the man in the ditch was. You're on your way to Jericho, or Burtonsville, or Silver Spring, or Laurel, or Kensington, or Ellicott City, wherever you live. That's where you're going. Now freeze that picture in your mind for a moment. You on your way to Jericho. Now if you were here this past Ash Wednesday, we read a portion that happens right before this section, and it is crucial to us understanding where God is in this story. And it's also really important for us to understand what God is like. And it helps us understand the story is much, much more about doing the right thing. Just before this, the Bible says, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent his messengers ahead of them. On their way, they entered a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. But they did not receive him, because his face was set towards Jerusalem, not Jericho. Jesus is traveling the same path in reverse. Jesus is traveling from Jericho to Jerusalem. Jesus is turning us around, not to go to Jericho, but to go to Jerusalem. Jesus is saying to you, you got to backtrack. You got to go do things a different way. There's a whole nother route. Now that's pretty hard if you think about it, to go a whole nother route, to not just take a 40-day detour. Sometimes the best thing about falling to our knees as we tumble into the ditch is we begin to realize how dead we are. How this road that has led us away from Jerusalem has been sucking the life out of us. So I'd like to suggest something. And you may not agree with me. And you may even think I'm being disrespectful. But if I were to say where Jesus is in this parable, I would say that Jesus is the donkey. He's the ass. He's the animal. Think about it. The donkey asks no questions. He shows no partiality. Carries whatever is placed on its back to wherever it needs to go. Travels back and forth along the road tirelessly and never ever gives up. The donkey knows the road like the back of his hoof. So yep, Jesus is the donkey. That seemingly insignificant piece, I bet you're all like, there was a donkey in the story? Yep, there was an animal in the story. That seemingly insignificant piece in the story without which nobody would have been saved, healed, or gotten home. The Samaritans couldn't help the man in the ditch without the donkey. The merchants couldn't do their jobs without the donkey. And the temple couldn't have functioned without the donkey bringing wares and people, and the innkeeper reliant upon the donkey in order to transport travelers. The donkey is necessary for life. The donkey bore the brunt of human need, of abject disregard, and was taken for granted. And nobody paid attention to him until they needed rescued from the ditch. The donkey, traveling this road over and over again, would see how very much we need to be saved from being robbed. But we also need saving from being the robbers. And that is the promise of Christ, to save us from ourselves, to save us for others, and to bear our burdens, and to turn us around and face us towards Jerusalem and not Jericho. And the donkey will be stripped and beaten and not left for half dead, but wholly crucified, abandoned by the world. And even that can't stop him. A donkey saves the world, saves you. Who knew? Thanks be to God.